Hello everyone, Ace here, and today let's talk about something that appears to be the beginning of a potential new trend within the entertainment industry. That being the retconning of woke elements from beloved IPs. There have been in recent memory no less than two notable examples of this in action. The first and more famous example being the retconning of Star Trek Discovery by the entire show being part of a different universe altogether as far as the Star Trek setting is concerned. This was confirmed via an episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, which as mentioned makes it very clear that Star Trek Discovery is a completely different universe in the Star Trek setting. Now, to be completely fair, and as already hinted, this doesn't completely erase Star Trek Discovery from canon altogether. It does still technically exist, albeit in a completely different universe. It does mean, however, that Star Trek Discovery can be easily ignored, at least as far as the impact to the lore of Star Trek that it would have otherwise had on other series, as well as the overall setting. Basically, while Star Trek Discovery isn't completely removed from canon, it is in a state where it might as well be for all practical purposes. This is still very much a retcon, and it is also still very much a win for actual Star Trek fans. But it is not the only IP that has recently received this kind of treatment, as Warhammer 40k appears to have retconned the Femstodes entirely out of its lore, with recent documentation on the Adeptus Custodes making it plain that the Custodes are an all-male faction. This particular change was less putting the unwanted stuff in an alternate universe, and more just erasing the records altogether. To be fair, this is at least in keeping with the Warhammer 40k setting. However, in both of these cases, it is of note that these changes weren't announced as some massive revelation that was going to be a defining moment in the lore of their respective settings. Instead, these retcons were just quietly put in, almost as if they were meant to fly at least a little bit under the radar. The sort of thing that you would expect if a company was trying to avoid widespread ire from the woke crowd, you know, the woke crowd that already does not play the games, read the books, or watch the movies, whilst also potentially drawing the attention of more hardcore fans who do actually engage with the content provided, and are more than willing to consider the implications of what to some would be seemingly small things. This may be a glimpse as to how exactly wokeness will finally die out. We have already, of course, seen the start of the decline for some time, and we are also already starting to see some higher profile examples of companies purposely removing woke elements from new pieces of media that are coming out. When it comes to the majority of examples, however, and more specifically to instances where companies have already made certain settings woke, the question does, like I say, become how does it all end? How does the ground that the woke crowd years ago captured get retaken by the actual fans? From the logistical and strategic point of view, we already of course know the answer. That answer has long been the free market and its ability to absolutely crush that which does not work. Basically, people shutting their wallets was all it really took to inevitably force these companies to abandon the woke ideology. As I've said many times, this is a process that is going to take years. After all, it took us years to get into this mess. It's only reasonable to expect it to take years to get out of it. When that does happen, though, it is very likely that most companies that will abandon wokeness will do so more with a very quiet whimper than a very loud bang openly announcing to all the world that they're no longer woke. From a more practical standpoint, it is likely they're just going to very quietly retcon all the horrific changes to the lore that were made by these activists. Though in some cases, if a company might be particularly more desperate to win its fans back, they could legitimately try something a little bit more drastic with regards to how exactly they retcon the woke dogma out of their setting. I myself have stated for the record multiple times that in the case of Star Wars, for example, I believe the best way for Disney to handle the sequel trilogy as well as the High Republic would be to reveal that Rey is actually a mental patient in a psych ward in the Star Wars setting, and that the entirety of the sequel trilogy as well as the High Republic are nothing more than her psychotic delusions. That would be exactly the sort of treatment treatment that the fake fans deserve. Is it the treatment that I actually expect Disney to provide? Sadly, no. If they did, though, they would actually go very, very far towards winning back at least some of the interest that the franchise has lost. I can safely say that I myself would be very curious to see where Star Wars goes afterwards, were Disney to actually do that. It would give Disney a genuine chance to potentially do something new with people that aren't utterly insane ideologues, or at the very bare minimum, they could just make the Thrawn trilogy a film trilogy as well. Getting back to the topic at hand, though, the recent news story that both Star Trek Discovery as well as the Femstodes have, for practical purposes, been effectively retconned from their respective settings, or at the very bare minimum, in the case of Star Trek Discovery, reduced to having the same amount of impact on the bits of Star Trek that people care about as fan fiction does. This recent news is very much good news, and is very much a sign of things changing for the better. This is once again a process that is going to take years. However, it is something that is happening and is going to continue happening for the foreseeable future. Still, it is nevertheless important to remain vigilant at all times in order to help keep this momentum going. But in any case, this has been Ace. Hope to see you guys again soon. Take care. Ace out.